Hello, I'm MK Sholin. Welcome to my Substack, Horror on the Page. Here is a safe space where we talk about the tips on the craft of writing horror, horror news, and trends happening in the world of horror movies, TV shows, and literature/novels. So what will you expect with this Substack? 2 posts a week. So earlier in the week, I will highlight an article, a resource book, or shoot a video like this one where I share a helpful writing tip in writing horror, as I am a horror writer. Think of it as a Monday motivation contribution. And then later in the week, expect to see a post regarding something in the news, again regarding horror, where I'll give my hot take on the subject, and then we'll open up the discussion so we all can have a thought-provoking conversation about it. So today's topic is all about the buzz around the finale of Welcome to Derry. I want to pinpoint some takeaways on the character of Pennywise the Clown in It, as well as the backstory of where Pennywise came from, which is a human character named Robert Gray. I think this is a masterclass in character development and hope some of the points that I highlight can help create richer bad guys and monsters and main characters and side characters in your own horror novels and short stories. But before I get into my quick tips, I think it's worth noting who am I and what kind of knowledge am I bringing to the table in this discussion on horror on the page. Well, I am a published horror writer with short stories in a few anthologies, just like this one. And I do write flash fiction where some of that has been featured has been shortlisted and received honorable mentions in writing contests. I also have completed a horror novel. It is not yet published, and it is based on true events where I have actually experienced some of those events in the vein of quiet/psychological horror, folklore, and that. And it's all set here in Maryland. So yes, I am here in Maryland, if you wanted to know that. I have started and led a genre critique group with the Maryland Writers Association, which I'm a happy member of. I have read hundreds of short stories and chapters and manuscripts through that. In addition, I do beta reading on the side. I lead writing groups and give talks on writing at different conferences in the Mid-Atlantic region of the United States. So that's a bit about me. Let's dive into today's topic. So as a lover of Stephen King, and one of the first novels I read of his is It, I couldn't wait to dive into Welcome to Derry because I have watched all the movies several times and even saw the TV special several times, the one in the 1990s, and just knowing that and this is going to be like an addition to this and it's going to bring everything together, I was truly counting down the years, months and days for Welcome to Derry. And I must say, it did not disappoint. It had all the feels, all the jump scares, the gore, the twists and turns, the satisfying resolutions, the wonderful characters, and the actors, which, hello guys, if you're watching this, you guys are awesome. And everything else that went into the plot was just amazing. There's so much really good stuff in this series that I really wanted to get into this. And of course, at the heart of the series, we have this Pennywise the Clown, which resembles but it is this extraterrestrial creature that is known as It. And also, we get to see the behind the scenes, the origin story of Pennywise and how that came about from a real person named Robert Gray in the story, I should say, real person in the story. So isn't that name even really telling, Robert Gray or Bob Gray? Anyway, we'll get to that in a second. But this is also interesting in how this whole character, feeds into how Pennywise needs to feed on the fear of children. And not just the fear, but the children themselves. And isn't it interesting that It uses Robert to get what he wants down to replicating the creepy, exaggerated Pennywise dance moves? It's such a beautiful play on everything that it does create such a rich character that, yes, I cannot wait to dive into. So on that note, do know I am not going to share spoilers, but at the same time, I will be talking about Pennywise in the vein through Welcome to Derry, which most likely will hint at some spoilers. So if you're good with that and you want to continue, we will continue on. If not, now's a good time to pause, watch that series, and come back to it, and we will join that conversation then. So as we move on, the first thing is the name Bob Gray, or Robert Gray, as I mentioned. It's so foreshadowing, isn't it? I love foreshadow. So Bob here, which is a super common name and is often used over and over in stories and things like that. It's just a simple one that comes off the tongue. It's an easy one to say, but it's also very generic. It's a generic thing. And followed with its last name, Gray, which just means average. It's not just great. It's not wonderful. It's not horrible. It's just middle of the line. You can even say it might hint to morally gray, which it's a perfect name for this type of character, don't you think? Because of all the heavy subtext connotation it conjures, it really works. So think about this when coming up with names for your characters. What can the name evoke? Think about that. Are you trying to evoke, or not really trying to, but if you're thinking about a good name that works for an era, think about what popular names were in that era. Or even if it's fantasy, like you're kind of getting into the fantasy horror stuff, what would be good for that? That where you don't have to do a whole lot of description, but through the names, it tells a lot. And these names can also tell a lot when it comes to horror, because horror is really good about foreshadowing, but also maybe heightens up the mood and things of that nature. So use names wisely and think about how you can make that work for you. Next, incorporating redeeming qualities that humanizes both Pennywise and it, which can help make, again, richer characters. I often read stories where the characters are often flat. And that kind of means that they're just not lovable. They don't come to life. There's not a whole lot of richness to that. So that means that we don't really see what their whys are. We don't really know what their triggers are. We don't see their skills. They might have a job, but you don't see those skills being used, which why even do that? So use those skills and see how they can help the story along. We also sometimes don't see in flat characters their failures. So you need to see those things where they stumble a couple of times and they finally get up and they get the courage and they defeat that thing. And of course, we also don't see flaws. Flaws is very important. Every character, every human has flaws. So showing that on the page really, really helps. Now, regarding Robert Gray, we see a lot of flaws with him. And Robert Gray isn't like a great character. He's not like the one that we're rooting for. However, because of those flaws, he makes that person believable and accurate in a sense. And or I should say authentic. Authentic's the better word. And it really helps show the opposite of good and dark in Pennywise. So with Robert Gray, we have him pulling at your heartstrings because you see some of the stuff that makes him real. You see his flaws. You see that he is raising a daughter and he is raising that daughter alone because that mom died early in life. And he's heartbroken over that too. He longs for the days where he was a big name in a really big circus. Like, it was so adrenaline rushing and he was loved. But now you see him deflated, where he's now just this little name in a little circus and you feel that constriction. And it works very, very well. At the core of it, he has this soft spot for his daughter. He tries to help her create an act, and at the same time, he's a sucker at wanting to entertain kids. He loves kids. He really wants to put that smile on their face. So what makes Robert a complete opposite version of Pennywise? Well, that's the good side, where you have Pennywise, who's this repulsive, scary, twisted monster. That's good. You want to have that opposite, and not that opposites attract, but it does attract in this story. And a side note, if you happen to pick up the copy of Save the Cat Writes Horror, it's something I'm reading right now and I love it. It talks a lot about how in horror, there's always a normal, happy setting world where everything's going on right now. But then there's a seedy, darker, underside belly or upside down version where characters can also exist. It's the setting, but then that can also be reflected in characters. And I think this really helps well with Pennywise because you see that push and pull, the opposites, and that really does create and add to the plot. Now, back to looking at Bob, or Robert, this plays into the last episode, this bit of information, and that was episode 8, Winter Fire, having the flashbacks. So there is flashbacks throughout the series, and those little breadcrumbs are adding up. And that all adds up to where the clown, Pennywise, it kind of boils up to this one point, and at that moment, it is trapped. And I'm not going to go any much further because I really don't want to ruin the whole thing because it boils up and boils up and boils up, and this is like where you don't want to hear that stuff. But if you know what I'm talking about, that backstory and it coming together, and it really beautifully works with this plot. So that's the power of rich characters. When you have these rich characters and they build and build and build, and it goes along with this plot, it really makes for a satisfying story. On that note, additionally, you also see contrasts between Robert and it, such as the costume. So that's something you might want to think about, is how people dress, carry themselves, how each of them are perceived by different people, and how they interact in the world around them. That's very evident in Pennywise and how Bob Gray lives and works in those worlds. We learn that smell plays not a wise role, but a big role in Pennywise when it comes to his desires. You see how the daughter of Robert views Robert, her dad, and through that you get a lot of perspective in what Robert's like and how she sees that, and how she also sees Pennywise, and how that all comes to a head also in the same episode 8. So there's a lot of interesting stuff when you can do things that differentiate, there we go, between the two. And that's really good in helping creating rich characters. So what's the whole point in all these examples? Well, let's look at different ways you can push the envelope to create richer characters and monsters. You should use all the tools you have in your writer's toolbox. Use all the senses, including what happens in your gut and the emotions that happen there. That really makes for something to really come alive. And you feel it. You feel it in your gut, right? You have obstacles. They will have emotions that they will feel when they encounter obstacles that will get in their way, and how they react to them, and how that hinders or helps them to get what they want or what they need. You got to make it clear that the main character, again, is a polar opposite of the monster. You don't want that to be too close together where it's, things are just confusing. It just makes the whole story, like, what's going on here? Confusing. So you want to use things that are going to be polar to create those nuances. You see that in the story because you have a military aspect, and there's people in the military that are kind of in a good and bad, and do they align with the monster or do they not? And that adds to the story. And I should also mention, not all bad guys should have all have bad attributes. Some of them could be good. They might have a save a cat moment, hence the name Save the Cat. Or maybe there's a core beliefs that they have, or a threshold they will just never cross. They won't cross that line. So those are little things that when they are faced with crossing that line, you're like, oh, I wonder what's going to happen. that kind of humanizes them a little bit. And the same thing on the opposite side. So if you have someone that's just this most wonderful person and they're so perfect, they're never really perfect because maybe they smoke behind the building, or maybe they kick a dog. That's something that Stephen King has actually mentioned in his advice. Just show them, if they're doing something great and all these volunteering things, whatever, but when no one's looking, they kick the dog. So, it shows that they're human. They're relatable in some way, shape, or form. So in my own writing, I try to be conscious of this. My completed novel involves a sentient house. But since houses aren't alive, its evolution is told through the main character that I've set up. And this main character lives across the street from this house. So through interactions with the house, this main character shows how the house grows from a crumbling old farmhouse, and she suspects that bad things do happen and will happen, and all the stuff that's going on around in the neighborhood is affecting the house. She then kind of sees and notices how there's subtle transitions, and it makes her question if there's a chance the house could pick its own owners. So there's things that are picked up through this character that tells about this house, the story of this house. And in the same time, it tells the story of her, because everything about this person, the main character, mirrors what's going on at the house. So it's a very interesting tale that is rich in character development, where these characters do come alive. Like literally a house does come alive, so to speak. I don't want to give too much away, but you get my point. So since Welcome to Derry is just very visual, this is the last thing I want to get to, you can see that the highly developed characters, that they just kind of pop. You see them, you don't have to have that mind's eye picture in your mind. But when it comes to writing form, you don't have that luxury. So the heavy lifting needs to come with using specific words when describing, say, physical attributes, or using extra sinister language when describing things, just to amp up that dread. And of course, you can add as much dread as you want. Have more emphasis on interiority, showing those messy emotions through how characters feel when it comes to making choices and bold moves, and maybe even how they recover from those failures and the like. Just like we all question everything we do. It's like, oh, should I wear the orange jacket? Should I wear the red jacket? Oh, that doesn't look... You need to show that on the page too. And I'm just talking about choosing clothing. It could be path A or path B. Do I knock on the door? Do I not on the... But you need to show that interiority, because that is something you cannot show on the screen, but you can show on the page in the writing. And some of that really does come across with the characters. That's why characters often talk and show contrast, like their voices, because you want to show how characters are not all the same. They have different voices. They react differently. Some are timid, and that's how they react. And some are bold, and they're confident and whatever. So you want to show these different aspects, and that helps bring about their characters being rich and very unique and very different. So this is how you can, I think, make those characters feel like they're just going to come to life. They're going to jump off the page, and when they just appear, only when they just appear as words on the page. So like I'm trying to say, you want those characters to jump off the page, to feel real. You want to root for them. You can't wait to see what's going to happen next. And you get that from Derry. And I just hope you can get that in your own pages. So while I could go on and on, as you can tell, I love talking about this. Now is where I want to flip the script. I want you to share your ideas on the subject. What are some examples you've seen in this story in Welcome to Derry, where there's some stuff that still needs to be mentioned, that you think some characters, really other characters you say, have some richness to them, and what you liked about those characters. Maybe there's part of this topic is timely for you and what you're currently working on. So I'd love to have you comment on how any of these tips are helping you create richer characters in your stories. So yes, feel free to tell others that you know about this. I'd love to grow this Substack because, of course, when it comes to discussions and conversations, the more the merrier. So yes, do subscribe so you can get the next post and video or comments or whatever we're going to be posting next. It's free. There is no charge for any of this. So until next time, I hope the words on your page breathes new life into your horror stories.